viewers, welcome to KANISHKA IAS. Today's topic is GM mustard. It is relevant in our GS3 Science and Technology. So on this note, let us discuss what is GM mustard, why it is in the news, and what is the difference between genetically modified organisms and transgenics, what are the commercial crops that are being cultivated in India, and what are the advantages and disadvantages of such genetically modified crops. So let us go into the video. First, why it is in the news? Because on April 15, 2025, Supreme Court will be hearing the pleas that are filed by the environmentalists on the commercial cultivation of GM mustard in the country, right? And what is genetically modified crops? See, it is nothing but a plant, an animal or a microbe in which its gene or DNA will be altered using genetical engineering techniques. That is known as genetically modified organism, right? Then what is the difference between genetically modified organism and a transgenic? See, already we have seen a GMO. A GMO will be again introduced with new genes from another species, and that will turn into a transgenic, right? For a better understanding, let's say this is a cell. Assume that this is already a genetically modified organism, which means this is already an updated genetic engineering technique made organism, and from this a cell, a DNA or a gene will be collected. This gene will be introduced into a plant cell in which we are now trying to make a transgenic, and then the cell division will takes place and the transgenic plant will be grown. This is the difference between GM and transgenic. It is nothing but in a GMO, another new gene, not the existent one, new gene will be added for a new characteristics. Why do we do this all genetic engineering techniques? Because we need a special features that are not available in the original breeding techniques, right? What we can prove from this, all the GMOs are not transgenics, but all the transgenics are GMOs. This is what you need to remember in the exam point of view, right? Coming to the GM mustard. GM mustard is also known as, and its scientific name is DMH11, which means Dara Mustard Hera 11. It was developed by Deepak from Delhi University, right? And it got its approval in 2022 by GEAC. What is GEAC? It is Genetic Engineering Appraisal Committee, which we will be discussing later. As it is already approved by GEAC, why again there are pleas filed in the Supreme Court? Because it was rejected by the EIA. What is this EIA? EIA is Environment Impact Assessment, which means all the developmental projects that will be taking place will be supervised by this EIA regarding the environmental impacts of those developments, right? Hence, GEAC approved the cultivation of GM mustard, but concerned with the environmental impacts, EIA had rejected the GM mustard cultivation in the country. So there are pleas were filed by the environmentalists in Supreme Court, and the hearing will be taking place on April 15, 2025. That is why we are discussing the topic today, right? Coming to the GM mustard, it is a cross between Varuna and early Hera 2. What is this? Alien genes. We already discussed a new gene of different species will be inserted in the original organism to get the special features. Those are also known as alien genes, and those alien genes are Barnase, Barster and Bar genes, right? Why are we developing this GM mustard? Because it will give the hybrid seed development and tolerance to the herbicides, right? And what is the other advantages of this GM mustard? It gives 27% to 30% more yield or productivity than the native mustard crop, right? And what are the impacts as assessed by the Environment Impact Assessment? It will lead to the biodiversity loss, creation of new harmful weed species. Hence, they have filed a plea in the Supreme Court, right? Now, what are the regulations of these genetically modified crops? Who will regulate these products? It is Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change under Environmental Protection Act 1980 6. What is this? GEAC, Genetic Engineering Appraisal Committee under Ministry of Environment and Forest, Climate Change. Will everything regarding genetically modified organisms or crops will be taken care by this GEAC, whether it can be reviewing it, monitoring it, or exports and imports, approving, transportation, manufacturing, use and sale of these genetically modified crops. Anything whatever related to genetically modified crops will be taken care by GEAC, right? And who will be taking care when it comes to the GM foods, which means genetically modified foods? FSSAI, Food Security Standards Authority of India under the Food Security Act will be taking care of the genetically modified food products, right? Coming to the, in India, what are the products that have got the final approval and are being currently cultivated in India? That is, only BT cotton is being commercially cultivated in India, approved in 2002. Why we are cultivating this crop? Because it is resistant to insect pests and bollworms, right? And what are the crops that are under trails? Brinjal, tomato, maize and chickpea are the crops that are under trails to be improved or introduced in India, right? We already discussed this point. GEAC approved the GM mustard cultivation, but the environment impact assessment had rejected the cultivation of GM mustard. Coming to the impacts, when there is a genetically modified crops being introduced, there will be some positive impacts and there will be some negative impacts. What are those positive impacts? It reduces the pesticide use and the conservation of soil health. It enhances the resources efficiency, also preservation of biodiversity. The main points you need to remember with respect to the mains part in this topic is, it will help in achieving the Atmanirbhar Bharat in food security, right? And the second point is, it will reduce the imports of mustards or oil seeds from other nations. And the third point will be the oil resources efficiency, which means it reduces the import burden on India, right? These are the positive impacts coming to the genetically modified crops. Coming to the negative impacts, it lead to the emergence of resistant pests like the COVID-19, which had emerged which has emerged globally. In the same way, new resistant pests will be taking place, for which there will be no fertilizers we can use, right? And then genetic pollution, disruption of ecological interactions and loss of biodiversity will be the main issues which harms the environment. That is why environment impact assessment have rejected the cultivation of this crop, right? So what all did we discuss? What is GM mustard, why it is in the news, and who regulates this genetically modified crops? What is the difference between genetically modified crops and or organisms and transgenics? What are the positive and negative impacts of this genetically modified crops? This is all for today. Thank you so much.